All righty, moving forward, we go to item 5M, discussion and possible action, including acceptance of a presentation regarding an assessment and needs of the county's public safety communication microwave system and radio network. Executive Office is a sponsor. And who is going to do the introduction?
Madam Chair, Janelle Rao, Deputy CEO. I'll go ahead and do a quick introduction and introduce the folks I have sitting with me here to present today. Just real quick, I have Cody Snyder to my right, who is our Information Services Division Manager. We have Tom Jacobson with Client First, our IT Master Plan Consultant, and Under Sheriff Matt Kendall with us. Also in the room, I'd like to mention that I believe Sheriff Tom Ullman is also present. And then we have Greg Glavich, who is a key component and a key member of this whole microwave team, as well as a newest member, Marshall Zanella, who's also on the communication team. As the board knows, we had an IT master plan that was adopted in November of 2018. Since that time, we've had a lot of research and have put a lot of efforts into trying to get a sense for the status of our microwave system. This team has been doing an analysis by site because each of them is very individually situated as far as land tenure, who we occupy or co-occupy with. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Cody, who will start the presentation. As we go through this, please interrupt at any time. I'll be kind of the monitor of any folks that have pens up and will nudge folks as you have questions. And if you don't have any questions of me, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Cody.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. I'd like to go ahead and discuss what we're going to talk about today, and that will be the system overview of what we currently have. We're going to talk about what our needs are moving forward. We're also going to look at what plan we have put in place to kind of address these needs. We're going to look at the funding requirements, and then we're also going to have a summary for you. I want to talk about the system overview of what we currently have and kind of what the state of it is and what our future state looks like. So our current microwave system consists of 16 sites. Each of these sites houses the public safety communications microwave and radio system. These locations cover the entire county. They're critical infrastructure. They support all of public safety communications. They also provide data support for departments in Willits and Fort Bragg for their day-to-day operations like saving documents and email and using their applications. A lot of these sites are in very remote locations and require a great deal of time to get to because they're up on mountaintops, and sometimes they even have extreme weather conditions, which limits access. I want to point out on here that we have a couple locations. If you look on the map, we have 3 locations in our design here that are stubs, I guess we'll call them. These are single points of entry. Essentially, any communications that goes to those locations only has one way in. So if something fails in the system, it basically eliminates communications anywhere along that line. So that area becomes unavailable and is a single point of failure. So we have currently 3 spots in the network that are in that situation. I'd like to just kind of describe.
Cody, just 1 minute,
Yeah.
please. Supervisor Williams.
Cody, you said we have 3 spots that don't have redundancy, that are
Yes.
single link. Do we see failures on those links ever?
Yes, we do. They're increasing, actually.
And if you could elaborate, when there's a failure on one of those links, what is the, for the public's benefit, what is the result? What services do we lose?
All communications for all public safety, so sheriffs, fire, EMS, types of communications in that area. If they don't have cell phone coverage, that's their only means of communications. So that entire area that it serves, so it would be like the South Coast, for example, would be without communications, or the Fort Bragg area would be without communications.
Okay, go forward.
Okay, this represents kind of in a block diagram of the types of equipment that's located at each one of these sites. Like on the ends here, we have the little dishes that are the big white round drums that you see up on the towers. That's what allows the sites to communicate to each other. There's the microwave radio equipment that connects to those dishes. And then in the middle, you have the network components and the 1950s sort of era analog components that tie to the actual radio repeaters, which allow them to communicate to the officers in their vehicles and with their handheld radios. So those repeaters are what let dispatch actually communicate. So this is a list of agencies that are supported by the system. I know we talk about the sheriff use of the system a lot. They're the single most important user. However, there's a number of other departments such as DOT, EMS, fire, and others listed here that also utilize the county's microwave system. Most of these have repeaters that they utilize in all across the entire county. Also, the data is also used across that, and a number of other agencies also utilize data across the county's microwave system.
Probably thinking about what I am, Supervisor Williams.
Let's hope so. I see a number of state agencies that are leveraging our microwave system. Are we seeking full cost recovery? Are they paying us to maintain this infrastructure for their use? And if not, could we consider a staff directive to put together a table of what full cost recovery would look like, say, from CHP?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Janelle Rao, Deputy CEO. In my tenure with the county and working with the microwave system, the county's never made a policy decision to do full cost recovery for those agencies that are residing either on our system or utilizing our system. And that, again, was, my understanding was just a policy decision that was never made by any seated board. There's been times when the former GSA had done some research into possible opportunities, and at that time, the current seated CEO at the time was not interested in pursuing that with the current seated board. We have done some preliminary research. Tom Jacobson actually works with quite a few different agencies throughout the state of California and the United States, and we've been doing some exploration as to cost models. So it's definitely a potential, and we would look for board direction before we proceeded with any further review on that.
That was what I was thinking. But I'm also looking at cities, because cities have their own revenues. So anyway, it's a mixed bag. Supervisor McCowan.
Well, Supervisor Williams asked the same question I had, and I think it's something that we should pursue.
Three of us. Supervisor Jurdy.
Well, I think some of us have been talking to staff outside these meetings.
Oh.
And I would just, I totally support that in looking at how that would work. And I think one potential option would be to look at our whole communication system being looked at as owned and operated through a joint powers authority, so that everybody has a stake in it and everybody is contributing towards it. So right now we're looking at it, this is county property operated by county staff, and potentially billing other entities for using it, and that's certainly one model. I think another model is to get everybody to be fully vested in this network, and for them to be fully vested in it, I think one way of pitching it is that, hey, everybody owns it. Of course, that bridge you own is also a liability. It's not just an asset. So don't you want to own the Titanic? Everybody can own a piece of it.
You can reserve a deck chair in your name.
Okay, go forward.
All right. Okay, we've noticed that we've had an increasing failure rate. We've done some additional data analysis, and we've actually noticed that in the last year, compared to prior 2 and 3 years, we've had a huge increase. We've gone from 1 or 2 outages system-wide to where now we're looking at as many as 7 this year. Some of these outages actually last upwards of 4 hours. So that means that essentially during that time, we have no communications back to dispatch. They increase because the equipment is getting older. I have real serious concerns for long-term reliability. It also increases our support needs greatly, as staff spend a great deal more time repairing equipment. When it was new, that wasn't the case. We had minimal repairs required. So, what other system needs do we have? Necessary improvements that we require. All microwave, the radios and repeaters are going to be end of life in 2020. Spare parts are really hard to obtain at this point. That means that essentially there will be no support from the manufacturer, and spare parts will only be available on the secondary market. And in some cases, they're not available, and so we end up just salvaging parts from whatever we have available. The dispatch console, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is also reached end of life. 90% of the patrol car radios are at end of life. Patrol car radios typically are taken out of an old vehicle and placed into a new vehicle. So we're not putting new radios in with the new vehicles, we're utilizing the old equipment. We have additional resiliency needs in the coastal areas, as we looked at earlier with those stubs on the microwave system. So we need to close those loops. We also have significant needs countywide in terms of facilities. The cooling and heating is problematic in some of these sites. They have generator issues, they have electrical problems. Some of the towers need inspections. We also have some suitability issues, especially with the dispatch basement location.
Supervisor Williams?
When you say the parts are difficult to obtain, is it just lead time, or is it that you literally can't find them, or you on eBay?
Kind of both, actually. We've had cases where some parts, it literally took us months to even acquire them, once we would hunt down a source.
So when you showed that map with the 3 links that are subject to failures,
Yes.
going forward, is it foreseeable that we could have a failure where we're literally down for weeks while we try to find
Yes.
a part?
Yes, that is entirely possible. Okay, so this chart kind of is similar to the previous one, where this shows the blocks that are actually end of life. So the components that we see here in the middle, the red blocks, if any of these components fail, the entire system is down. So that site becomes inoperable. All of those components are end of life. There are no longer parts available. The manufacturer does not support them. The repeaters and the microwave radios themselves, those components will be in that same situation mid-2020. So with the resiliency needs, one of the things that we were looking at is to close those loops. So if we look down here on the south coast, we take that stub, we want to go over to the Point Arena radar site and then create the loop for the south coast. That'll give us the 2 different paths in each of those locations, so we have better resiliency. And then a phase 2 approach would be to add the red line here, which would take the SNL, which is a single point of failure for that south coast, and bring it into the greater microwave system. That would increase its resiliency. And then phase 3 would be to bring Fort Bragg into the loop so it has more than one path in and out of Fort Bragg. So, Sheriff's Dispatch Console. This is located in the basement under dispatch. It was installed in the 1990s. It's really essentially old technology. It's all end of life. There is virtually no spare parts. We're literally salvaging parts, whatever we can scrounge at this point in time. I think the key things to know here is that essentially this component is what facilitates all 911 radio calls out into the field. So, and also it does deputy-to-deputy communications management. So if this component fails, basically it essentially takes out all the communications throughout the county. So it's a critical piece of the infrastructure.
One
Uh,
thing to note,
One,
I'm sorry.
one moment, please, Supervisor Williams.
Yeah, you said this is in a basement. Are there any environmental concerns? Does it remain dry?
Yes, there are, and I can talk about that in a minute, but basically it's in a potentially bad location in a basement where we have water issues and cooling issues and other problems.
Madam Chair, one other thing to note, Tom Jacobson, Client First Consulting. The dispatchers work on new modern technology upstairs. It's kind of like a behind the curtain thing. We hide the old junky stuff in the basement while the dispatchers have new equipment upstairs.
So, I love this slide. This is, shows the difference between the initial image where we had started, and it's the same location, but this is the middle of winter. So some of our facilities have significant weather issues they have to deal with. One of the problems we have is many of our sites have never had really any kind of a formal preventative maintenance program, and so these sites essentially are in pretty severe need of repair today. And I can go to the next slide. And this is a slide that kind of demonstrates some of the issues we have in some of the sites. The main inset picture there is the roof of the Point Arena radar station. We had some serious water problems. We literally had a lake on the roof that was leaking down into the building. The other photographs around the bottom and on the left upper side there is the Sanhedrin site. We actually have plastic covering a lot of the equipment because of environmental issues in there, and stuff gets wet and damaged. The upper right corner is our Spanish location, and that shows where we have penetration of water through the building, calcification and rust and other issues inside the facilities. So as we said, we have numerous structure and repair requirements. Some of them have cooling problems. This is a photo of the dispatch basement again. It had a cooling system failure here recently, and so we're currently running on a couple of backup units that are placed in there, and they're literally duct taped to some cardboard tubing that runs the heat out of the room. So we're operating in a room that is really not suitable for equipment. There's really not enough room for it. We have ongoing flooding and cooling problems. It just doesn't allow for future growth in that space. We also have 7 miles of power lines that go to the Sanhedrin mountaintop that the county owns and maintains, and a number of these power poles are in bad condition and need to be repaired or replaced. We also have generator issues. We have 6 of our sites are currently running on residential grade generators. The picture there shows kind of a relative size. The one on the left is the one that's the residential grade generator. The one on the right is the commercial grade. We really need to get those public safety sites up using commercial grade equipment. We actually had one of those smaller generators catch on fire one time, and we had several hours of outage at the site while we got that repaired. So that becomes an ongoing issue. Okay, so our upgrade plan. We have kind of a 2-phased plan approach. Essentially, this will be more realistic as we move forward with all the equipment. It will reduce the risk of long-term failure, and it gives us the ability to have the flexibility we need in order to make the changes and work through any issues that we run into. So what we would be looking at is replacing the repeaters, the actual radio repeaters themselves that communicate to the first responders. Those get replaced and tied directly into the network. We remove all that antique analog equipment out of the system, and that eliminates most of the highest risk of failure. And then phase
Madam
2.
Chair, we did some further analysis. About 70% of the failures that we showed you in the chart earlier come from this phase one equipment.
Yeah. So then the phase two step would be to replace the remaining equipment that's there. This gets rid of all the unsupported equipment. It gives us a lot more expandability and a lot more functionality. It increases the overall bandwidth and capacity of the system up to 3 times, and puts us on a much better plan. Okay, so I will turn this over to Tom to explain the funding needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think Cody's done a great job of going through the needs that we have. We have 3 slides related to funding. This first slide is in the order in which we presented the information to you. We just finished talking about the repeaters in phase 1. And phase 2 would be the rest of the switching equipment, the dispatch console. And the other key points on this are Point Arena. Cody talked about that, closing the southern loop. There's a $250,000 grant that we currently have. But in order to complete the facilities work at that site, we need to spend an additional $375,000. The facilities estimates at the bottom of the page are rough, without approval to, it's expensive to analyze in detail the cost of facilities work. So we didn't want to proceed with detailed analysis until we'd discuss this with the board. Budgetary total for phase 1, we've broken it out by using agency. The fire agencies in total are about 300+ thousand. Sheriff is 200,000. You can see county DOTs there. System-wide costs, ongoing maintenance and support. I think one of the major things with the current system, ongoing maintenance and support was cut from the budget during the recession and never reinstated. That's a part of the reason we're in the position we are is the funding stream essentially dried up. This one's sorted by need. The top item, which is the radio repeaters and the Point Arena radar expansion, are the items that we really, really, really need as soon as we can get them. Critical is, of course, the microwave facilities and the Sheriff's Dispatch Console, with the others to follow.
So this brings us to, again, Janelle Rao, Deputy CEO, brings us just in summary. We wanted to take this opportunity to present this to the board. We don't always have time during the quarterly updates that we give under budget to go really in depth on your IT systems, but more importantly, your public safety communication systems. We're here to present options for the board to consider. This team has been putting in a lot of time into trying to think outside of the box. When we initially approached the microwave system, our thought were that it was all or nothing. And because of the way the interconnectivity works and the systems work, but through some creative work and thinking with this group of individuals, they came up with a phased-in approach that I believe gets us to where we need and also would allow your staff the time to research cost modalities, potential collaborations, as mentioned by Supervisor Jardy, and doing some research with other counties and how they do their cost structures with their systems. This also was to identify the related capital facility projects, improvements and repairs, and even possible replacements. In looking at the system, we've always looked at it from an IT perspective and not necessarily from the total system, including those capital projects, and wanted to have a full picture of the county's communication system. And with that, we're here to answer any questions. I'd also invite the undersheriff or the sheriff, if either one would have anything they'd like to add.
Under Sheriff Matt Kendall. The only thing I'd like to add to this is, you know, we're getting to the point where a lot of us get with our vehicles and things like that, we either have to make some changes or we have to make repairs. And at what point in time do the pain and expense of repairs outweigh the pain and expense of, fixing things correctly and making some changes? Myself and that radio system have something in common. We both started in 1990, and neither one of us looked like we did 30 years ago. Probably aren't putting out the same work product either. However, we have the ability to, like Janelle was saying, that the issue was originally we thought it was all or nothing, and that's a bitter pill to swallow, that much money. But if we can start moving forward in these phases and actually begin changing things that will meet the needs of our future build out on this, then we aren't buying parts and pieces and trying to shove them together and hoping they'll work with what comes next.
Supervisor Williams?
If we had had one of these system failures during the complex fires, what would that have looked like on the ground?
During the complex fires, I'm sorry, Matt Kendall, Undersheriff, Madam CEO. During the complex fires, one of the best things that we had was our radio systems, because the 2017s, the radios were the only things that were working. We lost cell phone coverage out in the Redwood Valley area, and a lot of Mendocino County. We don't have cell phone coverage to begin with. And during any emergency, communication is absolute key.
And are these failures just theoretical? They could happen, or are we actually? What was the last failure we saw?
We had about a 4-hour outage at the South Coast, down by Point Arena. It was complete loss for 4 hours while we were scrambling to try to find parts to get the thing fixed.
So if you had a deputy responding and needing backup, you'd have no communication to request.
That's correct.
And this is an area with no cell service.
That's correct.
And the cell service on the South Coast is so spotty that you may get it, by Irish Beach for about 30 seconds as you're traveling, and then it's gone, and you might pick it up again by, areas of Manchester, or you might not, depending on what sub-area you have.
If I might also add, since the adoption of the IT master plan, I wouldn't want the board to think that we just started reacting to these failures. This team has been assessing each site and building profiles of each site in preparation for presentation of this. The critical failures and the rate of them have been increasing in such a rate that we fear catastrophic loss. And so we ramped up basically our analysis and thought process and started thinking outside of the boxes. How could we get there sooner while preventing the potential exposure in that manner?
Supervisor Jordy?
Well, as one half of the IT ad hoc committee, I'd like to thank the entire team for putting this together and looking at how to provide manageable projects that we could hopefully afford to fund, and would definitely support moving ahead with the phase one, but looking at it as part of our discussion that we would fund, I'm sure, as part of our year-end closeout, which is, we're talking about November. Later in November, we're going to have that discussion, and so I think that's the appropriate time to make the actual allocation. It would also give you guys a little more time to look at, are there any other funding sources that you can bring into this outside of the general fund?
Through the chair, Janelle Rao, Deputy CEO. I also wanted to mention that we are actively pursuing every grant opportunity that we can. Currently, we do have some potential under HMGP grant funding for the generator and generators at some of these sites. So as we're saying this, we are pursuing every potential opportunity for funding. But I would agree with Supervisor Jordy, and we've discussed this also with Supervisor Williams, as to looking at cost modality. Whether we would have that information before the November 19th meeting is doubtful. However, we would have more information on certain aspects of it, as you mentioned. But we will continue to pursue that funding and those opportunities as well, even when we're looking for this cost allocation from the board.
Supervisor McCowan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are the end-of-life items on page 10, are those all replaced in phase one?
Just what I was looking for.
Through the chair.
Yes,
Those components are replaced in phase 1 and 2, actually, not all of them. Some of the components replaced in phase 2, if we do that, that adds a significant cost to the total project to do it in once, and it makes it more doable, I think, because this is a multi-year project to do this. So we
So
have
you-
to do this in.
So I think you're saying the way they're linked in, it's more cost-effective to defer some of those into
Yes.
phase 2. And then the console, on page 21, it's stated upgrade and ongoing support, but we really mean replacement, don't we? We're gonna give it support as long as we have it, but we have to replace it.
Correct.
Then part of it is also the location. So is there a plan also when we replace it to bring it above ground or what?
Through the chair, there's an active team working on identifying potential appropriate location for that particular operation. It not only houses dispatch, there's quite a few county operations in there. There's the radio repeater system. There's also county IT data is located in that. Between Cody Snyder and then also Travis Forster, who's the Sheriff's Office IT, they're actively pursuing and putting in space plans and identifying potential models to consider. It would be foolish of us to replace equipment in a location that's not suitable. So we are definitely, that's part of the overall replacement that we're looking at. That particular location has moved up to the top.
go ahead.
Well, and then do we have any projected timelines for phase 1, phase 2, and dispatch console?
I think I can speak. What I asked when this came in, and Greg Lavich can probably tell you some of my choice terms, was we have to be realistic. When we're coming in and asking for this, we're telling you it's a critical need, and you know, there's a lot of trust in that when we tell you it's a critical need, but we also have to be realistic in what we can accomplish. In this current fiscal year, and probably into, I would say in a 12-month period of time, we could accomplish phase 1. If we looked at the total microwave system in totality, you would be looking at a multi-year project, probably 2 years, maybe 2.5, depending on the capital facility project needs, weather conditions. I mean, Sanhedrin, I can tell you, you all probably are very well aware, we can only get there through certain months. And that is one of our primary locations and one of them that is requiring the most upgrade. So you're looking at anywhere between 12 months at phase 1 through 2 to 2.5 years for the entire microwave system.
Given the cost, that's probably fairly ambitious to get it all done within 2.5, 3.5 years.
The last microwave system upgrade that we did, and it was an upgrade, it wasn't a replacement, we did how many sites? We did 12. Greg might be able to correct me. It was probably about a year and a half, and that was not constructing towers. I think maybe we put up 2 new towers. We did some upgrades to the equipment, and that was a year and a half, and that was 12 years ago.
I wonder also, you know, given the experiences we've had the last few years with fire-related emergencies, I'm sure you're all thinking about what state funding could be available to help us, and that could make the timeline more realistic, so, and achievable.
We've been working with our partners. LACO has been a very good partner in seeking grant funding. So they've got their ears to the ground and really trying to find any opportunity. What you look at is there's funding for hardening. I would use Laughlin, which was one of our towers that was actually damaged during the complex fire in 2017. That's a perfect example of a hardening project and what we would look towards. It would be a model we'd look for every site. Concrete facility, you know, you have a tower that's more durable, the equipment is protected, the setbacks are actually, you know, protecting the structure itself, the road is improved.
Thank you.
Supervisor Williams?
Overall, looking at the entire system, how much of the equipment today is modern and reliable? What percent of the current system do we expect to remain in place after we're done with the upgrades?
Basically, we're replacing all of the electronics in the sites.
So 100%
So
replacement?
pretty much 100%. The only thing that would not be replaced would be the actual, like, dish antennas that are on the towers.
And the towers themselves.
And the towers, yes.
All right, we're going to go to public comment. Anyone from the public that would like to get up and speak, please come forward. Okay, then it is back to this board members. Supervisor Williams?
I would propose direction to staff to put together a cost recovery plan. And I don't want it to be targeted at essentially impoverished fire districts that are, operating on pennies today. But I think where state agencies are using our infrastructure, we should be asking for full cost recovery. The state is running a surplus, we're not.
Excellent. Supervisor Hashak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, along with that, I think that we need to research full project funding and see with this carry forward money, how we can make it happen throughout the next few years. And, like Supervisor Jurdy was talking about, the cost allocation options and the other suggested collaborations and grants that we can go for with other agencies. So I think that needs to be a packet that should be coming back to us in November.
Supervisor McCowan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the recommended motion, I believe that what Supervisor Williams is suggesting could be encompassed within the cost allocation options and other suggested collaborations with appropriate agencies. Is that how staff would interpret that?
So,
I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
sorry, Supervisor Hashak, I didn't look that way fast enough. Do you have comment?
No, I was just going to move that action too.
Okay, so we do have a motion, a second. Seeing no other comment, we'll vote by the button. You're off.
The motion carries unanimously.
We do.
Thank you.
Usually public, yeah.
Yes.